Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbly's rifle. I've been rocking their Koda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbly's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbly's rifles, go to kelbly.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mac sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbly Rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mac, and today I am joined by a legend in the hunting industry, a legend in the woods, and a guy who just likes to refer to himself as a hunter. So without further ado, I have the man, Randy Newberg, joining us. We're going to be diving into the North American model of wildlife conservation and public lands and why it's so important to be talking about it and advocating it in our lives, but in everyone's lives. You know, we don't know what we don't know, so how are we going to get exposed to it? How are we going to expose the world to these concepts and these powerful, life-transforming opportunities than being able to talk about them, share stories, and converse? So without further ado, my man, Mr. Randy Newberg, welcome to the podcast.
Johnny, thanks for having me. I was looking back when you first emailed me. It was over a year and a half ago. You're a patient man. And when you came up to see me this winter, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in Puyallup.
It was that SHOT Show in Vegas when I saw you.
Yep. And I'm like, man, I feel so bad. I owe this guy a favor and a reply, but what happened is when I'm on the road so much in the hunting season, and then I jump right into this travel and trade show season, like SHOT Show and others, I get so far behind on my emails, and my wife kind of sorts them for me by folders, urgent or, junk or whatever. And I looked at how many unread emails I have right now, and I'm embarrassed. I try to be this punctual accountant guy, because in my other life, I'm a CPA. And it's like this baggage of guilt for not being able to get back to everybody.
Yeah.
I appreciate your patience and your persistence.
No, well, it's an honor. And anytime we get to, so a little history about me, Randy, is I turned 40 in the month of May. I can't believe it.
Oh.
It was when I was 30 years old, I took my hunter safety course for the very first time. So I've only been in this game within the decade. And from there, it wasn't until until I was 33 where I killed my first big game animal, which was a black bear 9 miles into the backcountry of the state of Washington. And I was a high school football coach, and I used to work at REI, and it was always, what adventure are you going to go on? And I was raised as a fisherman and a backpacker, but I had no concept of public lands. I had
Oh,
no idea that the same trails as I was hiking every August for fun were the same trails I could carry a weapon on and go hunting. And
yeah.
so my journey, when I realized that I could go hiking and combine my love of backpacking with hunting, I was like, okay, well, what opens before football starts? Because once football starts, it's game over. And so I looked at the regulations. I was like, oh, bear season opens August 1st. I guess I'm a bear hunter. And from there, my life was transformed through a variety of things, but number one, through courage, because it takes courage to stand for something and to be willing to risk going into the unknown. And that is a
Yeah.
part of what is so beautiful about hunting. So um, that's a
Wow,
little,
that's a cool story.
yeah, that's what has led me to my mission statement of mentorship is conservation. If you want hunting to last for generations to come, you got to invest in the hearts and lives of other people. Because
Right.
there's people like me who was a full-blown adult in my own life, and yet I had no concept of public lands. I wasn't raised by a hunter. I didn't have uncles that would take me out or grandpas or anything like that. And there's people that are starving for the ability to have self-reliance, to challenge
Mhm.
their adventure, their courage, their grit, and get outside of what they currently know of, the concrete jungle in the box.
Yeah.
And so
And
it's up to people like us to spread the word and the good news.
that's such an interesting background because I probably couldn't come from a more different situation in terms of my hunting exposure. I was born into it. I grew up in a little logging town in northern Minnesota where everybody I knew was a hunter. There was no question of, are you going hunting? It's where are you going and what time are you leaving?
Yeah.
And there were no social norms against hunting or any social pressures. If anything, it was the opposite, where, oh, my dad took me grouse hunting this weekend and we shot two grouse, and that was show and tell. Uh, and so, growing up in that, you take it for granted that, when you're young, you think that everyone lives the same life you do.
Hmm.
Then you get older and you go out to the big world, you're like, wow, that was kind of a unique upbringing. And I'm grateful for it, even though at the time I was living there, I'm like, I can't wait to get out of this little one horse town. Now I'm so grateful for it because I had a life of being connected to wild places and wild things through exploration and the inquisitive mind of a youngster, through the food aspects, through so much of it that formed my lens of the world by the time I was 6 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. What w- did you find yourself finding having a respect for the outdoors and the wild places very quickly, or was that something that came with maturity as you grew older?
Um, I think it was something that was taught to me. My dad and my grandfathers, both on both sides, my uncles on both sides, they all hunted. Aunts and sisters and nieces all hunted also. It still kind of strikes me weird when people think it's remarkable that women hunt or that it's an oddity because I grew up all the way.
Yeah.
It wasn't so. Uh, but I learned from all them. To your point about this respect factor, you learn a lot of things about respect when you're involved in the hunting process, whether it's you or whether you're just part of it as your family endeavor. There's probably no greater show of respect than when you take an animal's life and you utilize every piece of
Hmm.
it. I remember being maybe 5, 6 years old. My dad got a little spike buck in the kitchen, plopped it down on the kitchen table in this old junky house we lived in, and he started processing. He'd shot a deer. And I'm old enough that the deer's laying there on the table. I'm like eyeball to eyeball to this thing. And now you see this deer kind of have this bluish green look in its eye. And even though I'm 5 or 6 years old, I don't grasp it all, but I remember thinking, wow, this thing died. This was like one of the deer I'd see running around just a little while ago. And then my dad is processing that deer. My mom is cooking it on the stove as quick as it's coming off the carcass. And so this connection to me of wild things and food. And my dad was, he had his flaws like all of us do, but he was a very appreciative and respectful person when it came to wild things. He never wasted anything. He never took more than what he felt we needed. The principles that you hope that you are taught, I was lucky that he taught those to me. And so this respect thing became a life view or a life ethos that so much is being given to me right here in the form of this deer that I'm referring to. How do I show appreciation for that? How do I respect what brought it here? The processes, the institutions, the land, the just the freedoms of being able to go and hunt. And at the time you're 5 or 6, you're not processing it in that depth. But as you get older, with that as your starting point, you really do start gaining a lot of respect for so many aspects of the process of hunting. The animals, the landscapes, the people who came before us who made this possible.
Mm-hmm.
When you first start hunting, you're like, oh, that's just how it always was. And then as you start becoming a student of history, a student of conservation, you start realizing that, no, this is not how it always was. A lot of people stood up and made substantial changes to the status quo. And they took a lot of heat. They had a lot of pressure against them to not do that. But they did it for, as Roosevelt would say, those yet unborn or those in the womb of time. Those people, as I came to learn, did an awful lot to make it so that I someday would have the opportunity. So there's all these facets of the term respect that come to my mind when you bring that up. And it starts with respect for the life of that deer that was kitchen table in Big Falls, Minnesota. And it was going from the carcass to the frying pan within about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there wolfing it down.
So it's really interesting to hear you share this, because my experience, everyone has opinions. Very few people have perspectives, and perspectives come with experiences. And it wasn't until this November where I had my very first experience of killing a big game animal all by myself, bringing it home, processing it all by myself, cooking it all by myself, and serving it to my family. Up until this point, because I'm a fan of, the mentorship aspect, I'm always surrounded by other people in the woods, whether it's me teaching them or us learning together or whatever. And so I had that first experience being solo and doing it all on my own. And I'm cooking these back straps on our stove. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, the revelation hit me where it's like, no one is touching this meat until it hits their lips. And it just blew me away, like goosebumps all over the body. And I have respect for the animal and respect for hunting and all that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have created the platforms that I have. But it really is truly phenomenal, the experiences that hunters get to have. And yet, I want people to start sharing more. Because when these stories die with us, right, the legends, the adventure, the inspiration, they go away also. It takes courageous souls. You talk a lot about Theodore Roosevelt with everything that he did with public lands. I talk about him with his man in the arena quote. Right? It takes a courageous person to just go out and try daringly and try greatly. And whether or not you succeed or fail, you get to know that you gave it your best.
You don't get to be one of the timid souls he refers to in that book.
Yes.
And for me, hunting, and again, this is something that I'm still having revelations about how hunting has affected me and influenced the lens through which I see the world. But, you're talking about doing this all by yourself from start to finish. I think about the self-reliance part of that, the responsibility part of that, and the life skills that just get enhanced by being able or having the opportunity to go out and say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this all on my own. I'm going to eat it, I'm going to cook it, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to do all these things that in today's modern world, mostly in urban, suburban world, not many people get the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And them not having that opportunity to do that creates a void in this process of understanding, I think, of something died so that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is what's helping me live, I need to take care of that. The bigger thing of what it's a part of. I need to take care of the clean air, the clean water, the landscapes, the herbs, the health, all those other things. And I know it seems like this contradiction to people who've never experienced it. How can you love deer but you eat them? Well, because I eat them is why I love it.
Right.
And, I know it's really hard to explain to those who haven't experienced it, but when you get to experience it, it is an event in your life that adds another piece that you feel like, I'm glad that's no longer missing from my life.
It's very interesting. I come from a Christian background, a Christian narrative background, where in the Bible it talks about God would rather have you either hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, he'll spew you out of his mouth. And so we're always taught that it's either this or it's that. It's black or it's white. And in reality, there's a lot of gray in this world. There's a lot of in between, and that's where the majority of us live. Which, when it comes to public lands, when it comes to the defense of wildlife, there is conflicting views on what the purpose of wild places and wild things are meant for. Where did you really start to establish your thought process and establish your foundation of how you wanted to advocate for them?
Oh man, how much time do we have, Johnny?
As much as you want, brother.
I didn't quite realize it at the time when it was happening, but my parents got divorced when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
I was the oldest of the three kids. It was a really nasty, ugly scenario. My dad had a drinking problem, and it was not a fun guy to be around at the time. And he kind of was out of the picture for a couple of years. And here I am, 10 years old. By the time I'm 12, I'm going to get to home. And that is my dream in life. I'm going to. Well, everything that I had is this American ideal life that I thought this is how things were going to be. Whether it was taught at Sunday school, whether it was taught at our elementary school, whether it was taught at the home, all the institutions that supposedly were going to be there for me disappeared within 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
And so I almost felt like my life was counterfeit, that I'd been fed a bill of goods about what life is and what people are about, and trust. And so when you're 10 years old, you're going through all this. And it's 1975, where divorce was pretty rare at that time, not like it is today. And so there's the stigma of that. The kids are teasing me at school. But there was one place where life made sense to me. I was able to go down to the river, the Big Brook River, right down below our trailer house that my mom was listening to, and fishing and hunting, doing the things of just exploring. Things made sense. There was no charades, there was no false motivations. It was just true and honest.
Pure.
Because it had been brought up that, truth, in truth comes power, in honesty comes this. And it's like, so much for that idea. But
right.
Going back to a natural place where there's no room for any of this human contrived stuff. All right. this is this makes sense to me. And I could just feel this comfort, like the place is wrapping its arms around this kid that's really struggling. And then I leave there, and I lucked out. Well, when I lived there, I walk a half mile, and there's a state forest right there. And so, even though I was mostly hunting on my own, I was hunting grouse and rabbits and whatever, and fishing, and so when I left there, I moved to some places that had a lot of private land.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, this is really difficult. Where am I going to hunt? Hunting without a place to hunt, that's another hurdle I've never, it's no longer just walk a half mile out the back door of the trailer house. And then when I moved to Montana in 1991, I started putting the pieces together of how it was that I was able to become a hunter. And the very first thing that I was able to become a hunter was because I had a place to go, and that was public land. And without that public land, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation.
Mm.
If it would have cost $1 a day for a mother of three working as a waitress in a small town down there, it would have broke her heart to have to tell me, Randy, I don't have $1 for you to get home. I had public land, so I didn't need that knowledge. And by the time I moved to Montana, I'm 27, I think. Now the pieces are starting to fit. And you start thinking about this a lot deeper. You have discussions. And my wife is so observant. She's like, well, you goofball. That's why you're so attached to wild places and hunting and wild things, is that's where your life made sense when you were going through this really difficult period. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I think this, she can see the obvious written all over my face, and I can't see it. But so at that point, I started realizing how important this public land was to me. And my story, the Randy Newberg story of, single household having to figure it out, is not unique in America. But having a place to go and sort it out and hunt and fish and do those things is uniquely American.
Mm.
If I would have been born in Europe or lots of places in Asia or other places, there would not have been public land for me to go and do.
Right.
So I am, in my life, in my view of the world, and what I've grown to be is inseparable from public land in the concept of the public having a place to go
Yeah.
and enjoy it. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's
So,
perfect. It's beautiful because it resonates with me. A couple things that I want to say is I moved to Texas 2 years ago. Texas is primarily private land. Here I am wanting to hunt and still on my journey of learning how to hunt. And all of a sudden I moved to a place where I can't just go off into the woods. And how you said the woods was like the one constant where you got to be yourself and rest in the comfort of the never changing stillness of the woods. For me, my parents are divorced, and my parents got divorced during this journey of me becoming a hunter. And so I was actually going to be walking in his footsteps, my father's mini me of I was going to take over his football program, and I was teaching at the building that he taught at, and I was doing all these things that he did, but I was ignoring what I wanted. And I had this call upon my life, my soul. That's why this podcast is called The Soul Seekers. I had this call that there was more to this world, that I was meant to be out in these wild places. So I set off on this journey and fell in love with the wilderness. I tie it a lot to Christianity's narrative of like, go out into the wilderness to find yourself, where you get to be alone with your creator. But at the same time, I was raised in my household to be a scared little boy. I had a domineering father. I had a mother who did not speak up for herself. I was raised to go along to get along rather
Yeah.
than to speak up and advocate for the things I love and want. And so for hunting for me, like public lands was for you, hunting for me was me stepping into my own and being courageous for the very first time in my life and saying, I'm choosing myself. I'm putting my
Oh,
own oxygen mask on myself before I can put oxygen masks on other people.
yeah.
And so I always talk about how hunting has the power to transform lives through the primal adventure in which it is.
Yeah.
Because your life was truly transformed through hunting, through public lands, but it was hunting that got you there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
For me, my life, I'm a better husband, father, teacher, and business owner, everything, all because I was able to step into my own and be courageous and learn how to lead my own self so that then I could lead others.
Yeah.
With,
That's an interesting observation. You know, when you say that, it's got my head spinning about as much as my dad and I didn't have that great of a relationship because of his drinking and the divorce and all that. He was an intellectually curious person,
mm,
and he encouraged me. I'll go find out. If I had a question, hey, Dad, why is water blue? I don't know. Go find out. He encouraged me to ask questions and try to find answers. And I think the wild places are a wonderful place
yeah.
to learn how to do that and to try and fail and to seek better answers and to observe. There's just so many things that you get to do when you're out there in these places that I I feel really lucky that he encouraged me to do that.
Yeah. Well, there's never any coincidences in life, right? Like all things happen with purpose, whether we can see it right away or not.
But
Like,
that's it. At the time, we think it's a coincidence, but with the benefit of time to reflect on, you usually realize, no, that wasn't as coincidental as I thought it was.
exactly. Exactly. Just like for the very first long distance backpacking journey I ever went on, I was 7 years old. I was in second grade. And I did a portion of the Pacific Crest Trail from Highway 20 in the state of Washington down to Lake Chelan. And on the very first night of that hike, it was my father, my brother, a couple uncles, and a friend of an uncle. My brother and I went off to our tent, and the friend of the uncles pretended that he was a bear in the woods. And to a 7-year-old boy who's never like really journeyed like that, it wasn't the state park campground or or something like that. I was scared to death. My father didn't come to my rescue. I was alone in my tent with my brother who was also scared at that time. And then here I am, my very first big game animal that I kill 25 years later, 20 years later, is a black bear in the woods.
Yeah,
And that's not a coincidence that I got to
yeah,
challenge myself, my courage, and all that I am through this process. Now, the most fascinating thing through this is being a school teacher and being a PE teacher specifically, we easily forget that there's things that is common knowledge, which are not so common, right? Like common sense. Common sense is
yeah.
not so common. And we assume that people have background knowledge, right?
Right.
Like you grew up learning very quickly what public lands were, but for people who don't use public lands, who's ever going to talk about it? Who's ever going to teach them? Who's going to show them the way? So here I was, a teacher. I worked at REI. REI. My question to customers was, "Hey, what's your next adventure you're going on?" I sold backpacks for God's sake. Like that was. I had no idea that what public lands were, and no one ever taught me. No one
Yeah.
shared this with me, and maybe I'm unique. Maybe I'm a 1% of the
No,
population, but I can tell you that I'm not.
no, you're not at all, John.
So here I am having my life transformed through these public lands and wondering, why did no one ever tell me about this?
Yeah,
Where's the education? Maybe in, rural America, this type of stuff is talked about, gun safety, hunter's ed is taught within physical education or whatever,
mhm,
but it's not where I grew up. And that
yeah,
is the disconnect and why you gave your TED talk about the great American public land experiment, right? And
yeah.
what sets America apart, what makes America so great and beautiful. So where's the disconnect, Randy? Where
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of things that lead to that. And I ask that question a lot, not just in the public land issue, but in a lot of things. And my wife is from Las Vegas, via
Okay.
Pittsburgh. So they say opposites attract, right? She's this modest, never says a word kind of person, and I'm over there talking to every stranger I meet. She comes from the big city. I'm like so fresh off the turnip truck, man. I am like the bumpkin of all bumpkins. And we ask each other this question frequently of, where are some of these disconnects? And not just in this space of hunting and public lands, but I think, uh, for me anyhow, as America has become more tribal, we've become more urbanized, more suburbanized. I think we are inundated with a lot of negative messaging that puts parents almost in a point of fear or I would never let my child go down to the river.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come take my kids away. Um, so we've become a very protective society and somewhat disconnected from the natural world geographically. And when you're geographically disconnected, it's not like you're going out and doing it after school like I would. I'd go catch minnows in a minnow trap after school and I'd put them in a bucket, and that's what I was going to fish with on Saturday morning. I'm
Nice.
not going to buy minnows from some guy down here and pay 25 cents a dozen. I can go catch them in the creek down there. And I'll be honest with you, Johnny, I bet you half the time my parents had no idea what I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might have been 2 days later if I didn't show up that they would have been like, I wonder where he is. I might have fallen in the river and drowned or something. And so, again, a blessing I had was that freedom, the freedom to have places to go, but also the freedom that I wasn't in a culture or a society that felt they had to protect me from everything.
A fear-driven mentality.
Yeah. I, and I think if you teach kids that there's a big world out there and you can go and explore it, you won't understand it all. And it's not going to be this happy place of just rainbows and butterflies.
Right.
You're going to see and learn parts that are uncomfortable. You're going to fail at times. You're going to not understand parts of it, but go and try to learn it. It's way different than mom and dad saying, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you got to play right here in the front yard."
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going to build a fence around our house so the kids can play in the backyard. And I did in today's world, things are different than when I grew up. But I am forever grateful for what was true freedom as a kid, to just go and be a kid. And my parents didn't, one, they didn't have any money to send me to a soccer camp or a baseball camp or whatever in the summer. It's like, you know what? You better go out there tonight with your flashlight and pick some night crawlers out of the lawn, because that's what you're going to catch some bluegills with tomorrow. And when you catch those bluegills, you better skin them up and bring them here, because that's what I want to have for dinner tomorrow.
Yes.
And so, as I'm explaining these little steps of what a 9-year-old's doing at that point, and you compare it to what the average 9-year-old does in America today, I don't think it's realistic to expect them to be connected to a natural process or a natural world to the degree that I was allowed to.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you ask the question, where does the disconnect come from? I think it comes from a multitude of things. But I do think because there is a disconnect. That's the importance of people like you, like me, like others, to use our platforms to try to bridge those gaps that are disconnected. Bring that information to talk about why public lands are so important, to talk about the history of how it wasn't always like this. I mean, I remember this is where I start sounding like grandpa because I'm 59. I remember when there wasn't unleaded gas. And I remember small towns of, 10,000 people had terrible air pollution. I remember watching the news with my dad when we just got our TV on. And he was telling me this river started on fire. And it was in 1969. The Cuyahoga River starts on fire in Ohio. And I'm like, that can't be. Water doesn't burn, Dad. He's like, well, I'm watching it right now, son. It's on fire. And so all these things that were so different in time and space and just how do you replicate that, I guess, is the point I'm always asking myself. If there is a disconnect, if there is a societal border boundary that puts sideboards on things, how do you let people still have these experiences and understand that? Because I strongly believe that the reason I advocate and I am so connected to wild places and wild things is because I got to go and experience it.
Yeah.
And it became part of my life. If we think we're going to convince people to advocate for clean air, clean water, productive landscapes, public landscapes, without them having the tangible experience of seeing it, feeling it, breathing it, in the case of hunting and fishing, eating it, we're kidding ourselves to think that people are just going to understand that and advocate for it as some nebulous, intangible concept.
Right.
And that's why I'll go. If you told me, Randy, you never get to hunt again, but in exchange for that, the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, they're going to get to have the opportunities to go and hunt and fish and explore that you have, I'd make that deal all day, every day.
Yeah.
Because somebody somewhere, not somebody's plural, did those same things so that I could have these opportunities. And when I hear Johnny Mack talk about that he's 30 years old and he now has found this experience of hunting in this concept of public land, it puts a smile on my face like you can't believe. You want to talk about Randy being excited and feeling like, yes, this is why we do what we do. This is what makes it important, because you're that next generation that, someone was that generation that came before me. And I'm not saying I'm responsible for what you're doing, but all of us play a part and have a role in making sure that opportunity continues. That's what makes America one of the unique places, in spite of our bumps and warts and faults. One of the unique things we have is, in large part, a citizenry that can go and be part of a wild place.
Yeah.
And if they let their fears kind of subside and they just go for the sake of exploring and learning, Americans have this opportunity that most other places in the world don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have evidence to support what I'm going to say, but I would argue it to the ends of time. But there's a reason why the United States has a conservation ethos like it has. It's because we get to go and participate in it. It's not pitched to us as something in a textbook. We get to go and feel it and do it and smell it and breathe it. And if ever we lose that, the evidence shows that once, even one generation, if there's a gap of a culture or a tradition for one generation, it's nearly impossible to pick that back up.
Yeah.
Culturally, I don't ever want to see that gap happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever breath and energy is in this body sitting here talking to you, its best use is to make sure that continues long past when I'm done.
I feel like you and I need to do a series because there's so many different, like not rabbit holes, but fingers to the topic, right? So you're inspiring me first and foremost right now. Thank you. And because I preach that inspired people inspire people. You are living an inspired life, and it is contagious, and it's inspiring me. And now because I am a hunter now, I'm also a father of 3 young boys, and they get to be raised in that lineage, and we get to teach and share the importance of all this. One of the things I really want to address with you is you're firing me up for public lands.
Good.
Comma, but, and I'm saying but with intention, because usually I always say and, because it's but means whatever came before that doesn't matter, and it's all on the back end of it.
Yeah.
So I'm using my words specifically. I want to protect public lands, but I vote Second Amendment before anything else. And in today's world of the polarization of politics, the idea of public lands, which is a beautiful thing, and people would understand it more on a heartfelt basis if they listen to your TED Talk, because you talk about how it's an investment for us. It's a land trust for us.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, people view it as more of a liberal Democrat ideology rather than because people don't live an and life. This and that. I get to have public lands, and I get to have firearms, and I get to have the right to self-defense. You know what I'm saying? You can see where I'm going with this.
What you're talking about. I get it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you hang out with those, goofballs over there on that side. No, I'm. I refuse to accept the common day narrative that everything's in either or proposition.
The black or white that we talked about earlier.
I am not there. I will never be there. I think we should aspire to have better ideas when it comes to all topics. And right here, your audience can't see this, but it's funny you bring up the Second Amendment. I'm going to get this in front of my face.
No.
That picture right there are my great grandparents who had to come here from Finland because my great grandfather didn't want to be conscripted in the Russian army in 1913. But my family, we're pretty recent arrivals to this country. So when you're the oldest grandson in Finn lineage, you kind of become the keeper of the family stories. And that happens to be me. Well, his oldest daughter, my grandmother, she sat down and I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I spent a month with her every summer at her house, helping them out. And I got to learn a lot of this stuff. And she showed me her pictures one day. And at her wedding reception and at her 25th wedding anniversary, on the back wall, there's a gun rack full of firearms. I'm like, Grandma, what's the deal with the firearms? She's like, well, Finns will never be disarmed. And I'm like, okay, I'm Finn. Yeah, so I didn't really, you're 10 years old, whatever.
Right.
Understand. But I had never seen my grandmother as serious as she was when she said, sit down, Randy, we need to talk. I'm like, oh, what did I do now? I break her fine dishes or something? And she went on to explain to me the story of her father having to leave Finland. Left the country he loved. And a big part of what she told him was he felt he had to leave because they were not able to defend themselves. They were not armed.
Yeah.
So when he came to the United States, he became a firearm collector in one of the earliest senses. And he died 2 years before I was born. But I still remember her like she's sitting here on this couch with me right now saying, my father said he would never again be a peaceably disarmed man.
Beautiful.
And I am only 2 generations removed. My dad and my grandmother. I am only 2 generations removed from a person who had to leave the country he loved because he felt he couldn't defend himself. So if anyone thinks that I have some consolation thoughts about the importance of being armed in self-defense and the right to bear arms, I have probably a stronger, more connected story that lives in my veins than most Americans.
Yeah.
And if people on the other side who maybe say, oh, he loves public lands, but he's got a gun issue. Well, I don't give a damn if they think I have a gun issue. It's none of their business. I have a federal firearms license. I have 4 safes full of firearms. I have another safe of ammunition. And you aren't coming to get them because it's none of your business.
Right.
And if I want to have 4 more safes of them, it's none of your business.
You bet your sweet ass, right?
So I don't see any incongruency between my pretty much absolutist position on the Second Amendment and my absolute passion, support, and advocacy for Americans to have a place to go out and do the things that I've had the benefit of.
Yeah.
And I scratch my head, and this is why I'm not in politics. I'm not smart enough to know how the game of charades and facades and characters and stuff gets played. I'm like, why don't one of you decide you're going to be good at both?
What a concept.
You'd rule the world.
Right.
Imagine if you had a party that was absolutely completely within my thoughts, anyhow, my thoughts of sanity on the Second Amendment. And they were equally as passionate about public places and clean air and clean water and conservation.
Sounds
they don't all
my vote.
Powers of government.
Yeah.
They're obviously I'm missing something there. So when you bring up the but versus the and, I'm an and guy.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm an abundance thinker. You know, I'm not into this scarcity mindset that, well, you got to fight over less and less. I believe you can create more and more. And that's what I think, whatever detractors America has, there's validity to some of it, but there is an awful lot of America about the abundance mindset.
Yeah.
That we can do better. We can make more. We can create opportunities. We can create something from which there was nothing. That's a mindset of abundance and optimism that my mind just can't live over in the scarcity space that, I can only have this, or I got to fight somebody for this freaking little thing. No, that's not me. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm going out to lunch, but
you're the first person I've been able to speak to in the hunting space that can actually articulate that. And the importance of your articulation is that you use the word scarcity and abundance, because those are 2 words that in common day language do not get used at all. We don't understand that life we get to have an abundance, and we get to have an abundant mindset that there is enough and there will always be enough.
Good. And if there isn't, we go make more.
Correct.
Right? In my part of the world, we are being told, well, we have too many hunters. And I'm not going to say the woods aren't crowded. Okay, let's go make some more access. Let's go create some more public access to spread people out there.
Right.
Or we have the mindset of, oh, we need fewer hunters because it's already hard enough to draw a tag. Okay, let's go put twice as many elk on the mountain then. Problem solved.
Yes.
So and I think, and it's not just, in fact, this whole abundance scarcity mindset thing, I was taught that in business college.
Wild.
It's at the time I didn't quite understand it because they were doing it all in a business context. But later on in life, I explored that whole concept of scarcity versus abundance, because my wife said, you're the most optimistic, can-do, determined person I have ever met. I'm like, well, I hope that's good. And so I've tried to explore where that comes from. It's in people, not just in the business context. And I can't explain where it comes from, but I can identify it really quickly. The people who raise their hand say, "Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, let's do that." Those are abundance thinkers. And the person who says, "Oh, don't tell anybody. Oh, I got to protect my little piece here. Just shut up." Or they'll, manufacture all these human games of how to get more of the share for them. That's the scarcity mindset.
Mm.
And in my CPA life, one of the first things I do when I would meet with a new client is I'd write a little note on the inside of their file, whether I thought they were a scarcity thinker or an abundance thinker.
Wow.
Because one operates based on fears and and concerns, and one operates based on opportunities and hope.
Yeah.
And when you're giving advice to people, you need to understand where they're at, how they see the world. And you're going to struggle to give people good advice to the abundance lens if they're a scarcity thinker.
Yeah.
Or the other way around. And so, yeah.
Let's do a small scientific experiment with your controlled numbers. You look back over your years of being a CPA. What were the percentage of abundance thinkers versus scarcity thinkers?
I think it was a pretty high percentage. And the reason I think that is many of them were self-made people, very successful business people, built very, very big businesses, good businesses. And they did it because they believed there was opportunity.
Mm.
It didn't take no for an answer. They let the critics be the critics, right? Go back to what Roosevelt was saying. In effect, Roosevelt is saying, let the scarcity thinkers sit in the bleachers and complain. Those of us who are abundance thinkers, we're going to get in the arena and we might trip and stumble here and there, but in the long run, we're going to make it.
Yeah.
We'll build something. And so I think by kind of just the inherent need that business people have for consultants and tax people like CPAs, I probably was exposed to a larger percentage of abundance thinkers than I otherwise would have been.
Interesting. That's very, very cerebral of you to be able to reflect on that. I love that. Being a public educator and dealing more with like the general populace, especially at a younger age, I would say we are created to have an abundance mindset. And it is through our experiences in life, whether it's our home life, our parents, society, social media, regular media, that they're the ones that you said put walls up. I say stamp out their flame of the American dream, right? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? You can be anything, This idea gets smashed very quickly when we as parents, because I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old, so I'm in it. I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
And they look at me, and if I can't lead myself, how can I lead them? But they're looking at me like, Dad, you tell me I can do anything. You tell me I can become anything I want. You tell me no mountain's high enough. No, anything's possible. Then are you doing what you want to do?
Yeah.
Are you accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish? Or are you settling? Because if you're settling, why? Because it's already showing a scarcity mindset that, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not talented enough. I can't risk this money because this is all we have. And it's this generational, whether it's curse or sin or issue arises, that stamps out the flame that burns within the souls of these young people.
Yeah.
How do we fix that? That's another conversation.
I don't know, but when you get into this stuff, all of the anthropologists and the others who study the evolution of human psychology and human thinking, say that the abundance mindset is something that probably didn't have an opportunity to develop until recent times of the last few hundred years. Because prior to that, if you killed a woolly mammoth or found a woolly mammoth, you defended it from any other people who might come and try to steal it from you.
Right.
That was a necessity. So if you subscribe to these theories about how the human mind evolves, there was a scarcity mindset that was almost a necessity to survive.
Yes.
And then we became more of a social animal. We started finding places for government, for religion, for all kinds of other things. We started realizing the power of human collaboration. We started realizing through technology and other things what we were capable of.
Mm.
And that, a lot of these people who study this will say, that's when we in the blink of human time, we've only had the real opportunity to be abundance thinkers for a real small part of that.
Right.
And therefore, there's some inherent bias in our DNA or whatever you want to call it towards the scarcity mindset. And so it's, if someone says, yeah, I'm kind of a scarcity person, that's probably more natural.
Mm.
If you subscribe to the theories that are out there on that stuff. But anyhow, if we're going to have more wild places, more wild things, more access to it, we have to be abundance thinkers.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that, man. See, and we got to shout it from the rooftops. I don't understand why 5 o'clock news isn't having us on to talk about this and be like, instead of hey, there was this going on, this shooting and this problem, be like, guys, I got good news to share.
Yeah.
You have this place that you can go to anytime you want, and you can use it, and you can use all 5 senses: smell, sight, hear, taste, feel, all that, and immerse yourself.
But here's the other blessing about Johnny. You and I and others, we have platforms where we can, within our platforms, we can be abundance thinkers.
Yeah.
We can promote that message. And if we affect 2 people in the next month to think about their lives and they become more focused on what blessings they have and what they could do with their health and their life and their opportunities, mission accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, you answered this question a little bit earlier, but I'm going to ask it more directly to you.
Okay.
Could you give up hunting today?
Could I?
Like if,
I mean, I could, but I wouldn't be the same person I am.
yeah.
The human body and mind can do anything they decide they want to do. Would I? No, I'm trying to think of what it is in my life that would cause me to give up hunting. I can't think of what that would be. Could I live without it? I could breathe without it, but I don't know that I could live without it.
That's a beautiful answer.
I mean, I had an uncle who passed in 2015. He was one of my mentors growing up. My mom's brother, right behind her. He was dealing with brain cancer, and he lived in Idaho. And he called me like, Randy, I can't get around. I can't do a lot of things, but I sure would love to come up. And I know that you track muskrats and beaver for these ranchers who are, dealing with property damage from critters. He said, I'd really love to come and just hang out with you for shows out there. Sure. So we did it, and it wore him out so bad. And he was this energetic guy who I had never seen him down and out. I'd never seen him full of anything other than fire and energy. And here he was. He's sleeping as I'm driving the truck, and it wasn't a hard day. It just he had to try to stay awake and it wore him out. And as I'm driving, finally jumps up and he turns to me and he says in a real profound way, he's like, Randy, I'm not long for this world, and if I've got one thing I want to tell you, Don't confuse breathing with living, because they're two different. And that sticks with me pretty much every day. In fact, it's written on my whiteboard at my office. Am I breathing or am I living?
Wow.
Yeah.
You're cool. You're a cool guy, man. I just seriously, you are like the I'm gonna use a term and don't take offense to this, but like the dad I wish I had to speak wisdom into my life about this.
Yeah.
Uh, because
Uh,
these are the things that make an impact.
well, I hope that's the case, John. Um, you know, I have been blessed in my life beyond anything I could have ever imagined. You think about the fact, here I am, I'm 59 years old. I've had some health events in my life that I pulled through, and I feel like I got a second chance on my health. I am married to a woman who is such an unbelievable person who supports me in every crazy, wild idea I come up with. She sees my happiness as part of her happiness, and the same goes the other way. All the business things I've done in my life have put me in this position where now I can go and do what I love to do, something I'm absolutely passionate about. And I don't know how long I'll live, but however long it is, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I can do it without having to worry about a paycheck. I'm not accountable to anyone's money. And I'm not super wealthy in any way. I don't mean it that way. I've got enough that I'm going to live, comfortable life, but I can't think of a greater blessing in life to have your health, to have someone who supports you the way that my life supports me, and be in a position that you can go and do something that you believe in to the absolute core of your soul. And that's where I'm at. So when I am at this remarkable place of blessing, I, I, I couldn't do it. I would feel guilty complaining or feeling like I deserve more or being a pessimist. It
Yeah.
just, and so when you come to my platforms, it's about having fun. It's about putting a smile on your face. It's about trying to make you feel good about who you are, where you live, what your life could be, and get rid of the static.
Yeah.
Right? My grandma, who I referred to, who sat me down and told me about the families and then her father leaving Finland. She had a 1966 or 67 Ford Falcon. That was the only vehicle that I remember her ever on. And it had the AM radio dial. So you had to spin the dial and it'd go, and then a station would come on. We'd spin it some more and it'd be static and then a station would come on. And one day I was kind of down in the dumps, I remember, because my parents divorced. There were things that I didn't like dealing with. But at the time she said this, it was really, I thought, oh, Grandma, you just have been nothing too much mentally. And she goes, Randy, you're kind of in charge of your own happiness. The world is full of static. It's up to you to go and find where the music is.
Yeah.
The music that you like. She was talking about the radio dial on the phone. Okay. Little did I know, she was saying, Randy, there's something out in this world that is going to sing to you. It's going to capture your soul. Go find it.
Yeah.
And don't complain that there's just static.
Yeah.
We all have a tendency to hear what we're looking for and to find what we want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I was blessed to have someone like her and others who helped me find the music in my life.
Beautiful.
And I can tune out the static better than that's static. No, is that going to matter a year from now? Nope. And that's static.
And that's what sets you apart also, because there's I forget the psychology term, but if you're looking for something, you'll start seeing it more often.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. The confirmation bias
Confirmation bias, yes.
it's real. I mean, the only place we can see it better than in social media, right? I mean,
Right.
that's how, you've got 3 young ones at home, and I don't know how old you are, Johnny, but you're a lot younger than I am. So I'm going to show you a picture of my phone. Uh, I don't know if it's showing up here,
Yeah.
but anyhow, you see, there is an Instagram icon on there.
Yeah.
But here's how much I know about social media. I hit it, and a bunch of pictures start popping up. And other than that, I don't really have a clue. Someone will send me a text or call me and say, Randy, can you share this on your Instagram? I'm like, yeah, I think we can do that. Let me talk to one of my guys. They'll figure it out. So I feel so blessed. I'm almost going to continue to be intentionally ignorant about social media.
Yeah.
Because Facebook is a little bit easy. It is so draining and so negative.
Yeah.
I don't feel that it has to be, but that's the path it's headed down, and that's just not me.
Yeah.
I'm not done.
Being a physical education health teacher, I would always teach what health is. Health is not the absence of disease, right? That's called not being sick. Health is living, right? Like that's being healthy. This idea of, and I didn't learn this until I went to a leadership conference. That's where I learned abundance mindset versus scarcity. But they were talking about this idea, which I wholeheartedly believe it goes with confirmation bias. You always get what you always want. Whether or not we acknowledge it as being something that we want, you always get what you want, right? And then it's just a matter of how bad do you want it and what are you willing to either trade or risk for that desire of what you want. And
that's you don't. I'm your confirmation bias on that stage.
it's beautiful, but if more people understood that, it's like, dude, that's the American dream. Dream it and be it and do it and see it and experience it. If we could boil it all down to this, it's just actually identify to each individual person in this world, be like, what do you want? Are you unhappy with where you are? Yes. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Like, we just start repeating it over and over. And it's like, well, I want to be happy. Okay, but what does happiness look like to you? Well, I want to have enough money. Okay, so what does that look like to you? I want to have a relationship with a spouse. Okay, so what does that look like to you? Like, what do you want? Let's start hammering it. And
it's funny you say all these things, and this is, again, going back to my hunting life or my nature-connected life. Every one of those things where you're saying, well, what is it you want? Or how much is enough? Or whatever. Every one of those questions, when you're asking them, the flashes through my mind are life lessons I learned being out in the wild. The way I would answer every one of them. I have such a bias towards a view of the world through that lens of someone who grew up hunting and fishing and failing and succeeding. I'm also a big proponent that failure in the context as we define it in America is a really good thing. I call it learning. Most people call it failing. And I intend to learn until they put me in the grave, which means I'm going to fail until they put me in the grave. And you think about public land elk hunting, well, 9 out of 10 days I go out, I know I'm going to fail.
Right.
Probably more than that. Probably a higher ratio of failure to success rate. That builds just a relentless mindset where, okay, I'm not deterred by the possibility of failure.
Yeah.
You can come up with any concocted idea And if I thought it was a good idea, you don't have enough risk factors to talk me out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know how hard this is going to be? I don't care. It's something I would want to do. And so, yeah, we're going to fail. So what? But we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And, it's just a matter of how many learning lessons we have along the way. And I think America, or maybe the world, has stigmatized the learning process, and they've called it failure.
Mm-hmm.
They put this negative connotation on it, that you failed. Okay, maybe I came up a little short, but think of all that I've learned along the way.
Yeah.
And these go back to my life skills learned while hunting. The other one I see in today's world is how many people struggle with sorting out and dealing with factors or conditions they don't have any control over.
Right.
When I'm out hunting, I can't control the weather. I can't control the hunting budget. I can't control what the elk is going to do. The only thing I can control is my mind.
Mm-hmm.
My success that day on that elk mountain is dependent upon how well my mind operates.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Complaining about the weather, complaining about your neighbor, or complaining about the guy who maybe has a bigger truck or a nicer house, that is just static. That is a distraction to you accomplishing what you want to accomplish, where you want to find your happiness or your success. And so I'm thankful that hunting has taught me to deal with the variables I have no control over. I don't get any anxiety. I wish my wife was sitting here, because she'd be like, this guy, there is nothing that makes this guy anxious in me. Why? I don't know, because I just grew up not worrying about the things I can't do anything about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we're also in a society that has a tendency to fret and worry and try to control every little thing.
Yeah.
It must take a lot of energy to do that. I don't know, because I don't try to control it all, but I just see how drained and wore out people are trying to control everything.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have that much energy. I got too many other things I got to get done.
Right.
But all these things I talk about with people, you're talking about trying to inspire, trying to give lessons, whatever term you want to put to it. I feel lucky to be in the situation I am. And the last thing I'm going to do is be that whining, complaining guy. I want to be that guy who said, you know what? He may not have it all figured out, but at least he's trying hard. He realizes that life is life, and you get to make of it what you want.
That's right.
My grandma Clara on my mom's side, she lived to be almost 102. And whenever she'd go somewhere, they'd say, Clara, how are you today? She'd say, oh, I'm perfect. And every once in a while, people be like, Clara, how can you be perfect every day?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, it's free and it's just a state of mind. So I may as well be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I say that there's all the coffee shops in Bozeman, they call me Mr. Perfect. Because when I come in the morning, they're like, how you doing today, Randy? I'm perfect. I'll always be perfect. I'm like, well, it didn't cost me anything, and it's just a state of mind.
Yeah.
And Grandma said, when you get up in the morning, you're lucky. You get a choice to make. Is it going to be a good day or a bad day? And you're going to be right 100% of the time, depending on what you choose that moment.
Man, talk about a revelation right now. It's like when God calls us to be perfect as his Father in heaven is perfect, it's just a mindset. It's just I am perfect. I'm complete in how I am and where I am and showing up.
Yeah. And so I mean, perfection is a it's a process of trying to attain something. Trying to better yourself is the process of trying to reach perfection, but we'll never get that. We can do that whole philosophical discussion of that. But for me, it's a state of mind that says, you know what, I couldn't ask for any more.
Yeah.
I'd feel guilty to ask for any more than I have today.
When I was teaching health, I would, this cracks me up because you'll actually know the artist. I'm teaching a bunch of eighth graders, like 13, 14-year-olds, about mindset, right? Perception versus perspective, right? Perception is not reality,
Yeah.
right? But how we view things, we get to make our mind up about that. And so I'd play Cat Stevens for them. Um,
Oh, wow.
if I ever lose my eyes, I won't, like if I ever lose my legs, all that stuff. And they're just
Yeah.
sitting there being like, like he won't moan, he won't beg. If he loses his eyes, he's never going to have to cry no more. Like it's all mindset. And, they're looking at me cross-eyed like, Mr. Mack, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But,
Well, I I think that, and this is weird to me. I don't know how it happened, but every place I go, where I'm in a gathering of people that I don't know any of them, somehow the 4 or 5 other hunters in that room and I end up in a little huddle somewhere telling hunting stories. And how among the 300 people, the 5 folks who hunt end up connecting, I still can't explain, other than I think hunting and the immersion in the natural world. This creates certain characteristics, certain mindsets, certain approaches to life where you just, it's like magnetism. So,
yes.
how can you end up talking about this? We're the only 4 guys in this room that hunt. How do we bump into each other? I can't explain it. But for some strange reason, it seems like no matter where I go, I bump into people who hunt and who have very similar perspectives about the world, about their just they just have a lot of similar traits and ideas that come from life skills learned through hunting and through the failure and the challenges. And I just wrote an article for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation called The Elk Hunting MBA. And in there, I make the case that every MBA program should take 1 semester and force their students to go be public land advocates. They're going to learn how to have to deal with a lot of adversity. They're going to have to learn how to fail. They're going to have to learn that their business plan they spent 4 years writing is pretty much irrelevant on the second day of business.
Mm-hmm.
Just a list and list of things, and why so many hunters I know are very good business people, whether they own their own business or they run someone else's business. And so I'm going through all these things, and I don't know, maybe it's my bias for it, but I view the world through that lens, and I think there's just so many life skills that come of it.
Can I affirm what you just said? And may I read you something that I wrote?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Here it goes. Here's my TED Talk in a bottle. Hunting public land on a non-guided DIY hunt is the great leveler or equalizer for mankind. Not knowing the outcome of our authentic interaction with nature and the organic paves the way to a humble heart in the simplest of terms. Hunting is human at the purest essence when there is no ego involved. It takes the mightiest and most powerful of mankind and puts them on the same playing field for what is ultimately the truest form of Hunger Games. There's more to that as I get into like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and tying it into, mankind. But this idea that what you are defending so vivaciously and what I am advocating so fervently is like people need to get out there and experience it. And if I could boil down this last hour and 17 minutes of a beautiful podcast, and I'm not trying to wrap it up, if you want to keep going, I'm glad to, is this idea you talk about public lands as the great American experiment.
It is.
What we know about America is this idea from sea to shining sea, this concept of manifest destiny, that it
Mhm.
is God given for us to go out there and take, use, participate in what is given to us. And in my view of the world, we have gone coast to coast. And there's a lot of other types of people that would argue a lot of anger towards manifest destiny concept. However, with
Mhm.
that being said, if we look at it on just like a global 30,000 foot humanitarian level, as hunters, public land is our manifest destiny. We've gone sea to shining sea, and now where do we get to go? Is we get to go up into the mountains, up into the wild places. And that is our, like, if you want to call yourself an American, go out and use public lands.
Yeah.
Get after it because it's your calling, your God given right and ability to live, not just breathe.
Yeah.
And
I think you need a T-shirt there, Johnny.
you're getting me
At
fired up,
least,
Randy. I'm telling you, man.
well, there's just so many things there that I could sit here and talk for hours on. And probably the one, and this comes with age, and you will experience this someday, is you get to a point in your life where you realize how much has been given to you. And if you believe, as I do, in the old statement that too much is given, much is expected,
Yes.
I don't know how you can look at the life that many of us are blessed to live in a country like the United States and not feel that you need to do what you can to see it to continue. And I don't care if it's hunting, conservation, the things that really drive me. I'm sure there are other people who feel the same way about other parts of America or their culture or whatever part of America. And if uh, if somehow hunting is not still here in this country and an important part of our culture, in 200-300 years from now, whatever little role I had in my little bit of time here, I would consider my time to have been not a success.
Mm.
It,
Yeah.
it just that important to me. It defines my view of America so strongly that I cannot envision an America without public lands and without people out pursuing their own food and exploring and learning the way I
Yeah.
was. I couldn't that just I don't know if my mind isn't smart enough to play that imagination game, or I just refuse to.
Yeah.
But I cannot. I know I get back to your question. Could I see myself or not coming? It would not be the life I want. And if I tried to envision an America without home, it would not be
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'm as passionate about it. The America that I can't separate hunting and conservation from my feeling of being an American. And that's what I talked about in that TED talk of the Great American Experience.
Yeah.
Whether by accident or whatever, through the 240 years of that process, it has defined who we are as Americans in some way, shape, or form. To some of us a great way, and to some of us a lesser extent. But that public land, and the reason I call it an experiment is no one really knew the outcome. And I don't know that we necessarily. There's a lot of people who had their fingerprints on this experiment, and they had some common things. It was about the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. And I think that has, when America is doing its best work, it is keeping its eye on the horizon of who is that next guy is. And we see that definitely in the public landscape, and in the public wildlife.
Yeah. Yeah. It's phenomenal. You do a very great job of articulating that and showing your passion for it through your presentation of everything that you share. It, to me, when I hear you speak, what I receive is that there's a reason why the First Amendment and freedom of speech was put number one, and why we need to be advocates verbally about the things we love. I'm a father of 3 young boys, and if I think in my head to them all the time, oh, I love you, Carter, I love you, Cannon, I love you, Case, but I never verbally say it to them, they're going to go their entire life without their father ever saying I love you, and them doubting whether or not I did. Now, actions speak louder than words, but the power of the spoken word carries so much weight. And my question, in through my own experiences, and you have your own experiences that you get to speak to, is where are the hunters that are speaking up for this? There are them. They are there. But I'm saying in my short experience of getting into the game later, like, how come no one was like, hey, you want to come? You've never hunted? You got to try it. The way we talk about a nice new fancy restaurant in town. Oh, you haven't eaten there? You got to try it, right? Like, dude, you haven't hunted? Guys, come on. That's it. We're booking a trip. We're making it happen.
Yeah. There's been a generational change in my lifetime that I've noticed. And I always have to remind myself that hunters are a cross-section of society. So I suspect this thing that I'm going to try to articulate doesn't exist in the hunting space. But when I was growing up, hunting was a very social activity. It had zero competitive feature to it in the least. It was a collaborative thing. It was the place where you rekindled some relationships with a friend, an old war buddy, like my grandpa and his other two buddies. They got back together for hunting. There were just all of these things about hunting had zero possessive nature to it. And so I came from this culture that has zero possession. I can't view hunting as this possessory thing that somehow I own this or I'm protecting something for me. It's just not how I live things. But in the hunting space, we have seen the presence, the emergence of this protective thing. And it's always in my spot. I'm not going to joke. I'm not joking out of it. Why would I do that? That's just, they're going to take my spot, or it's more competition. And so I think we have some contrasting views within the hunting space that are based on those reflections. There are some people who are very vocal that we don't need any more hunters. Okay, knock yourself out. If that's what you want to advocate for, you go right ahead. I'm not here to stop you. But if you think I'm going to shut down my ideas of getting more advocates, connecting more people to the wild landscapes and the food it provides, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get over my work, or you're going to just die pissed off, as Grandma would say.
Yeah.
So we have those differences in perspectives within the hunting space, but I think we have seen, and back to your question of why is it the way that it is, and where are the people speaking out of this? I think we've in the hunting space, we've found ourselves in more of this. It's kind of exclusionary. I'm one of the club. And I don't think that's healthy in the long run. I struggle to understand it. And people look at me like I've lost my mind. How do you not understand this? How can you not see that this is, if we have 2 more people out here, this is like the end of it. I may as well just quit and go home.
Right.
And then I run into people like you, that have come to it in their adult life. And I hear very often people say, well, I don't care if there's more hunters, but they need to come by it naturally. Come to hunting like I did. Oh, really? Says who? You now the gatekeeper who gets to determine who gets to become a new hunter or doesn't, at what age, at what background, at what. So uh, I don't have an answer to your question, John, about where are the voices in it. I know there are voices out there speaking about it, trying to do what we can to, even if we don't create more hunters, more importantly, we create more advocates.
Right.
We convert more of the people who currently are hunters into being more vocal and more outspoken and more active in their advocacy for hunting and wild places and wild things. But whatever that place or that path goes to have this scarcity mindset that, no, this is all mine. I need mine, but I got to have this. And hell with the rest of you. And I don't like hunter ed. I don't like anything that you do that might bring another hunter to the fold. Boy, I'm gonna shoot you down. Knock yourself out, pal. You better pack a lunch because I'm gonna be here for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't understand the mindset enough to even answer your question about why that is there and why there isn't more of the welcoming part of it.
Wasn't it the whole idea of conservation is that there's enough to go around and that there's enough for generations to come? Like,
That's when George Bird Grinnell and Gifford Pinchot came up with the term conservation. It's the greatest good for the greatest number for the greatest period of time.
mm-hmm.
It's not, as much as I can get for myself for my lifetime.
Right.
That's the antithesis of what conservation has been in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. My phrase, my mission statement of mentorship is conservation is that, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, their statement is hunting is conservation. I can get behind that. I can get behind this.
Mm-hmm.
The mentorship is conservation is mentoring people, just loving them, is just investing time and energy and a conversation or a phone call or a physical engagement with somebody outside of their day-to-day to give them an experience. And then you never know what little seed gets planted and then grows into, this beautiful, beautiful tree, or, fanning the flame and a spark turns into a forest fire, and every metaphor you could ever think of. Right.
Yeah. I agree. And I just hope that people will go out of their way to mentor others.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, in today's world, you can do an awful lot of mentoring without having to be right there in the chair next to you.
Correct.
And yeah, it's great if you can give them example and be there teaching and giving, what you know on something and sharing your passion. But if there is one of the blessings of today's world of communication and technology is you can do a lot of mentoring without having to be geographically connected.
Yeah.
The hurdles of geographic distance are no longer what they were.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for that, because, the American family structure of people moving all across the country. When I was born, my mom and her 7 siblings, all lived in the same little area.
Mm.
And so did their parents, and so did grandpas and grandmas. That was 1964. That is not 2024.
No, not at all.
So this whole mentoring thing is a lot more complicated than it used to be, which makes it even more important.
Right. Right.
And so however we can do that in whatever little way, shapes, or forms, I hope that we do.
Yeah. Well, our jobs is to be encouragers, right? And definition
Yeah.
of that is to fill someone with courage. So if we can fill someone with courage to experience something new where 10% of the time they're going to be quote unquote successful and 90% of the time they're going to be unsuccessful, but to be able to overcome the lack of success, and that's why there are the 5 stages of a hunter,
Mhm.
and understanding that, every small wins add up to a great success. And
Yeah.
when we get to encourage people to go about this, then lives are truly transformed and we get to be the change we want to see in the world and live out our purpose. And if we really care about hunting, make sure it lasts for generations to come.
Yeah. That's what drives me.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I don't have of my 6 employees. I think only one of them is over 35, and they keep me young physically. They keep me younger than I am, but they, I can look at them and see the importance of trying to inspire in them the conservation ethos that the hunting world that values have, the generational transfer of culture, of knowledge, of tradition that has brought hunting to where it is today.
Yeah.
And when I see them, that motivates me.
Yeah.
I hope that happens.
Yeah. You don't have to know it all. You just have to know how powerful hunting is in your own life, and then to be able to share that with other people, either and specifically articulate it, talk about how much it is meant to you in your life, and that you hope other people would have an experience like that to get hooked. So, Mr. Newberg, if you were to give 30 seconds of this is what I want people to take away from this podcast, what would it be?
Smile.
Smile.
Every day is a good day if you want it to be.
Yeah. It's always a choice.
Yeah. You are in charge of your own happiness. Grab the wheel and be happy.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for giving your time with me tonight to hopefully, who knows what years this episode is going to land upon and what difference it's going to make in someone's life. You are an honorable man, and I really want to acknowledge you for showing up and pursuing the life that you wanted, because you pursuing the life that you wanted is impacting my life and is impacting my children's life, and it impacts beyond the generation that we are currently living in today. And I want to say thank you to that.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And like I said multiple times, I've been so blessed. I can't imagine living a life with anything other than smiles and optimism.
Yeah.
And it's just who I am. So
I love it.
I really appreciate you having me. Appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate your persistence. That's why your elk hunting career is gonna be so successful, because your persistence was remarkable, and your professionalism about how you did it. I get some people who I feel bad when I don't get back to them right away, but some people don't handle that as well.
Well, I appreciate it. My brother, he told me one time when I was a little down in the dumps about not having a date when I was younger. He goes, "Hey, man, let's say you got a 30% chance that a girl's going to say yes to you. If you ask out 10 girls, you have 3 different girls that you get to go out on. You ask out 100, you have 30 that you get to choose from." So, stay humble and just if you want it bad enough, you always get what you want. And I wanted you as a guest on this podcast, so I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much, Johnny. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this episode. If you found this inspiring and really getting you going and motivated, please like, share this podcast, share it with your community, talk about it, advocate for hunting, advocate for public lands, for wild things and wild places. Be the change you want to see in the world. Remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and that you can never outgive good, as mentorship is conservation. I want you guys to be blessed. Remember that life is happening for you. It's not happening to you, and that you get to be the change you want to see. For Johnny Mack and Randy Newberg, the hunter, freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.